Hello, and welcome back to We're Not So Different, a podcast about how we've always been idiots. My name is Luke Waters, and as always, I am an amateurish historian. Fuck, I messed it up again. And anyway, god damn it. I am joined by Dr. Eleanor Yannicka, who is anything but an amateurish historian. It would work better if I actually did it right.
I think it worked.
Hey, thank you for listening to my ongoing battle with my neuroses.
I don't know. I think that we need like more big ups for Luke. Less worries about, charming ways to redo the intro. That's what I think.
Oh man, I do.
Luke positive podcast. That's what this is. Yeah.
Oh man, everybody wants that.
Yeah. Exactly, correct.
Oh man, but I'm not any good at that.
No,
Self-deprecating is the only one I'm good at. That's the thing. Like, and eventually it was the only one I was good at, and now it's just a complete defense mechanism to everything. So,
Healthy.
Thank you. It's exactly what my therapist said. Yeah.
And there's no problem here. Keep that up. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Definitely not something, there's definitely not a problem where you have, it's definitely not an issue that you have problems talking about yourself or accepting praise of any kind.
Have you considered going into some form of podcasting?
Actually, thank you. I actually did.
Wow.
Oh God. Yeah. Oh my. Today we're not talking about a modern day Failson like myself. We are in fact talking about medieval Failsons, and 4 of them in fact. But before we get there, we have a question from Buddy Dude, who says, are the present rise of atheism, paganism, and folk religions the result of an evolving superstructure brought on by capitalism's slow death, or a trend that arose independently of socioeconomic factors? Eleanor?
I don't know. Can anything arise independently of socioeconomic factors?
I'm not sure. I don't think it can. I don't. I'm sorry. People are not writing these questions to have me answer them before you. I'm just here to riff off of what you say. But
yeah,
I don't think I don't think it's evolving. I don't think the rise in it is part of part of capitalism's slow death. I think that's probably helping some of it, but because people could become disenchanted with the answers that religion has or gives, but it's just nothing does arise independent of those factors, because if you I think the contemporary idea is that atheism as an idea came into its own in the early 1700s or so, and Eleanor's talked to someone recently who talks about atheism actually in the Middle Ages, so we might have an interview or talk more about that in the future. But the contemporary idea is that it basically arose in the 1700s, and part of it was because of scientific advances in science. We figured out stars move, and we got rid of heliocentric, we got into heliocentric, and all of that. So it's just I think it's a combination of all those factors that people, and a lot of people embracing atheism probably has to do with the failures of both the church, the Catholic Church, and the Protestant churches that sprang up. And it probably happens similarly elsewhere.
Yeah,
you get upset, because your life isn't as good as, the leaders of the Ottoman Empire say, and you kind of move towards something,
Yeah. No, I feel like, because basically this is what I have to say, from a historical materialist perspective, which is what, I guess we're attempting to, come at history with, or at least I try to. And indeed, a Deleuze-Guattarian kind of standpoint, I suppose, especially coming at it from a Deleuzian perspective, nothing is independent of anything. right? Like society as a whole is a kind of, I mean, you could say, they have all kinds of different ways of talking about it, but, it's a rhizome. So, all of these things are kind of like in society together. And so the socioeconomic factors that are happening in any given society allow for these things to kind of come through, right? So when we see, Christianity as the dominant form of belief or understanding the world in, the medieval period, the late antique period, when Europeans are going around and doing this, part of the socioeconomic structure that is feeding it is that very fancy lads are the ones who kind of like control the church and do all the thinking, right? So they're doing all this philosophy that is predicated on the idea that God exists, and it can't say that it isn't. And we see unbelief often in these types. Now we do see fancy people who maybe didn't believe in things, like Frederick II probably doesn't believe in things. Yeah. We'll talk about one of the Failsons today, behaves as though he don't care. Things of this nature. But we often see it from people who are not fancy. Right. And so the way that they will talk about how they don't believe in God is they'll be like, I don't believe these things.
Yeah.
I don't believe in transubstantiation. I don't believe, I don't believe in heaven. I don't believe in these things that I'm being told. But that's not atheism because it's not a belief structure. That's just kind of an independent sort of thing. And we don't, and we also don't treat it very seriously, right? We don't treat it very seriously because we're snobs. And we think of atheism as being like a directly kind of like enlightenment driven thing where it's like, well, now we're all very fancy and we understand new things. So we're fancy and that's how we know things to be true. So unless it's fancy people who have come up with like a whole way of discussing it, then it isn't real. Right. So one of the reasons, though, also that you see stuff like atheism take off within that context, the context of understanding it as its own form of philosophical unbelief, I suppose you could say, is that, we all have, education now. Yeah. Right. Like, universal education is a really good and big thing. And one of the things that does post-Enlightenment is says, hey, by the way, religion is a bit weird. And if you then learn history, for example, it can put you off of things. Right? It can put you off of things to know what everyone's been doing the whole time. And then I think that comes along with, the slow death march of capitalism. Absolutely. Because, we're using religion and more specifically, in both the UK and American context, the kind of like the myth of the kind of Protestant work ethic. To explain our societies and their quote unquote success. So then if that's not working for you, it's pretty easy to then also critique, religion on top of everything else with that. Now, in terms of kind of like the uptake in belief in paganism and folk religions, I think a lot of the time that also is kind of speaking to a sort of alienation that a lot of us are feeling, from nature. Yes. From, the kind of phenomenal universe around us, and from, these things that are really quite magical. I'm always kind of talking about, I'm always going on about how magic is just stuff that we can't explain. And, we're surrounded by that. And it can feel really good and really special to connect with our environment. And also I think that with paganism and stuff like that, I mean, a lot of nerd-ass nerds out there like myself who really enjoyed reading Greek myths growing up, like shout out to my people. And that is a kind of coherent and cogent belief system that actually makes a little bit more sense, I think, in some ways, because if what you're saying is that we have a universe that is dominated by an all-knowing and all-loving interventionist God, then what the fuck, homie? Right? Yeah. Whereas if you have a pantheon full of guys who are kind of weird and a little bit rapey, you're like, well, it explains a thing or two. Right. Yeah. Like you can kind of go along. You can kind of go along with that. And I think also you see, especially with folk religions and stuff like that, with our indigenous friends, they're just out here doing their thing, which is very cool and good. And I like to see more of that. But I mean, I suppose that my thing is it's a combination of factors overall, wherein you cannot take out the fact that capitalism is failing us. as a society, and we've kind of been driven to a point where, you know, the only thing that's, you know, seems really beautiful and magical anymore is kind of like when you see a real cool tree.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, no, yeah. I've talked about my love of trees, you know, on the show many times. But, like, so I think...
I love a tree. I'm out here doing, like, when I see, you know, because since I was raised by hippies and, you know, in a kind of, like...
Yeah.
Buddhist kind of whatever milieu, you know, I've got a lot of Shinto practice in there, and I'm just like, you find your girl clapping and bowing to a tree all the time. If I find a real good tree, I'm going for it. You know.
Yeah, I love trees. They represent something, you know, like much more deeply in tune with nature and much more like long-lasting and permanent than you know human existence. But like as far as the question goes, like we talked about it last time, or when we did the what if episode. Nothing in history is you know definite. There is nothing that will absolutely happen, but like the rise of atheism after the discovery of scientific thought that made it possible for there to be another tangible and easily understood explanation for why the world exists, why the systems on the earth exist, and like why we are actually spinning around the sun, and we're actually not the center of the universe. We're actually, you know, way off on the edge of some galaxy that is only one of so many galaxies in, you know, a universe that's 13.9 billion years old. When that occurs, regardless of and it's not that we have become, you know, oh, we're so wise compared to those idiots in the past. It's that there is now a language that allows for the explanation of why people in the past had the things that Eleanor was talking about, like the unbelief thing. Like, I just don't think that, like, in the past, you just had to be like, you know, I don't think this. I don't, you know, I don't believe in that. But now, like, if you question it, your level of, you know, unbelief now comes with something, and you can be like, well, you know, the Bible, you know, it should say that, you know, that the earth is like the center of the universe, and that God created us and everything. And now you have to be like, okay, well, actually God created the entire universe, and God created this thing. And not only did God create the entire universe, it's not 6,000 or 8,000 or even 100,000 years old. It is almost 14 billion years old. And then you have to, and then in your head, you have to go, okay, why would God do that? Like, where is that in this cosmology? Because for a long time, yes, people now do the like young Earth creationism thing, but like people in the past also thought the world was only like 6,000 years old.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, completely. Yeah.
Like, you know, Constantinople, you know, they famously like, you know, counted it out, and they were like, you know, it's year 6,800 of existence or whatever. And you know, but like now you have to explain that, like, no. Not only have things gone on for much longer, humans have only been on this earth for like a tiny, minute fraction of the time it has existed. And so now you have to be like, okay, God created the universe, and then he waited a long time, and then he created Earth, and then he waited a lot longer time, and a bunch of things had to happen. Then he created man. And like, I'm not saying that being a religious person makes you stupid. I think religion is an expression of the inner, like, nuministic feeling that people have about how small we are in comparison to the world or the universe or something. Religion is an expression of that. You know, that's an expression of God.
Oh yeah, completely.
Differently and through a belief system, but you get the idea. But like, when you have that alternate explanation, and then you combine that with the fact that people are like, man, my life fucking sucks. Like, you know, my wife died, and my kids are sick, and, you know, the farm's not making any money, and, you know, or insert whatever circumstances you have, and then you become disenchanted with the church or, Protestantism or whatever.
Yeah.
And now instead of being like, well, I guess I just need to pray harder, I guess I need to whip myself in the street, now you have an alternate explanation that does not rely on, well, God is mad at me. It's that I live in a universe that is beautiful, but is not it doesn't care about me specifically like as like a loving, nurturing God would. I am a being here, and I have to make my own way in the world and make my own understanding and give my life meaning. And when you have that as a ready example, it's
Yep.
I think that is something that really just, it doesn't have to come about the way it did. We don't have to have the same type of atheism. It could have come about maybe a little bit sooner and stuff like that. But it's just one of those things, like, once you have a competing system that can't explain why the universe exists outside of God as the prime mover, then you are going to have a rise in disbelief, in my opinion. Not because religion or religious people are stupid, but because there is an alternate explanation that people can now use to be like, no, there is no God. My kid died. How would there be? Why would a God allow that to happen? It's one of those things,
Yeah, no, I feel it. I mean, I suppose also like specifically within the Christian context, it's kind of very difficult to know there's so many trillion billion galaxies, and it's like, okay, so is God and the whole Jesus thing, is this like a Green Lantern franchise type of detail where it's like every habitable world gets one, or like what? But having said all this, I think a good thing to keep in mind too, the rise of atheism is real, and it's certainly becoming more prominent, but still only 7% of the world's population are atheists. So oftentimes I think it feels as though there are more because we're often around them. But rather a lot of people still, and also, it must be said that, outside of the Christian context, there are plenty of religions which kind of allow more for that. Like that's one of the things about, like Shinto, right? It's like, it doesn't have to be. If you take out the kind of prime mover thing, but when I talk about they in Constantinople, they were like, oh God, the Earth's 6,000 years old. Meanwhile, Hindu religion talks about the universe being billions and billions of years old. So like that didn't come as a shock to absolutely everyone in the same way, but still, these things contribute. And I think I think with, the atheism thing, you have a lot of people who are just like, I'm not an atheist. It kind of like, honestly, just kind of like, I just don't care. Or it's something that I don't want to worry about, and that's, those people who just don't go to church or, say they are irreligious of any sense. And they're just kind of like, Yeah.
If there is a God, he's an asshole. If there's not one, okay, fine. I'm going to live my life and be, a moral person according to the moral code that I have. I think, So, yeah. Buddy dude, thank you for the question. And if you would like to ask us questions like this that I will occasionally expound upon, then please subscribe to the Patreon, patreon.com/WNSD pod. You get access to our regular episodes, ad-free, bonus episodes, like our final entry in our book club series on Dante's Inferno, which is coming later this week for patrons, and access to the Discord, etc. Yep, $5 a month. Check it out. That would be really cool. Anyway, on to the main show. So last time we did an episode about famous medieval women wherein we discussed Hildegard of Bingen and Eleanor of Aquitaine, two of the best to ever do it, with legacies that long outlived them. But there's a problem, at least for Eleanor's legacy, because of her many dipshit Failsons. That's right. This is an installment in our occasional medieval Failsons series that overlaps with an episode from our occasional medieval women series, folks. It's called Synergy, or some buzzword like that. As we did on our first medieval Failsons episode, which was about Wenceslas and Sigismund, Charles IV's idiot boys, we will spend a brief moment talking about the life and times of the parent in question before turning the focus on their dumbass sons. In this case, our introduction to the parent will be even shorter because we spent half an episode talking about Eleanor of Aquitaine last time. Instead, the lion's share of our focus will be on her four uncouth, brutish, duplicitous, sacrilegious, domineering, jock, preening, and or rebellious large adult Failsons with Henry II of England. They are Henry the Younger, Richard, Geoffrey, and John. Eleanor actually gave birth to 5 sons in total, but her firstborn son with Henry II, William, died in infancy. All 4 of Eleanor's sons who lived to adulthood either were kings of England or had aspirations to be such, and yet all 4 were largely miserable at what they did. One of them, Henry the Young King, rebelled against his own father, enlisting the help of some of his brothers to do so, with brothers fighting on each side of the rebellion. One of them was King Richard, who went on crusade but was captured during his return with the ransom for his release, essentially bankrupting the kingdom for a while. One of them was Geoffrey, who desperately wanted to be king but was also a dilettante who was crushed to death by horses during a tournament, probably. And the last of them was King John, known to history as the villainous and tyrannical background antagonist of the oft-retold legends of Robin Hood. Oddly enough, despite having all of these idiot sons running around, Eleanor's 5 daughters all lived to adulthood and were all royalty who had children, some of whom went on to be emperors, kings, and queens. But boy, were her sons just dumb as hell. Eleanor, what do we need to say about Eleanor of Aquitaine, at least with regard to these 4 Failsons, that we maybe didn't hit on as much last time?
Yeah, I mean, so she's got greater or lesser extents of contact with them, and we know more or less about them. So, for example, we know rather a lot about Henry the Young King because, he was destined to be king. But having said that, we don't really know much about his childhood. Like, we kind of start knowing more about him when he gets older and gets betrothed. We know a little bit more about Richard, which is interesting, just because he's the mama's boy. Or whatever, which is very surprising, right? Because he's something like the 4th son, even though they also have this other brother William who died as an infant. Yeah. So it's just neither here nor there. Geoffrey we know very, very, very little about, and so and John we know that he kind of grew up around his dad, not his mom, because his dad had picked himself up a girlfriend by that point and what have you. So we know kind of varying degrees of things with this. But what we do know is that it is pretty common for children to kind of get moved around the place and fancied up in varying different ways. Like if you are from a fancy royal lineage, you might move one son here to, become more English, and another one here to become more French, which is sort of what kind of happens with these kids. But as a general rule of thumb, I mean, Eleanor can't have been that bad of a mother because the girls seem to do all right, but it's just kind of, I guess that part of it is you take them out of her orbit and they get a little bit weird, having said that, how do you explain Richard? So, yes.
The miracles of parenting. Sometimes you just have no fucking clue how it's going to shake out. All right. So, we are going to talk about Henry, Richard, Geoffrey, and John. We're just going to do a bit on each of them. We'll start with Henry, and, there will probably be a little bit of overlap in each of these, but, that's just how it is. So Eleanor, tell us about Henry the Young King. He was born and and then he got in a fight with his dad.
So he's born
as happens to so many of us.
And so you got to understand, with a lot of these kids, one of the things that keeps coming up is their mom's ex-husband. Okay. So it's just get ready. It's such, oh my God. The French, ladies and gentlemen. So the thing is that, obviously Eleanor, as we were talking about last episode, had been married to Louis VII, and then she got married to Henry II, and there was all this kind of thing back and forth. Anyway, Henry and Louis still fucking hate each other, but like one of the first things that we know about Henry is that he gets betrothed to Louis VII's daughter, kind of like at about 15, right?
Yeah.
And this was just kind of like a thing where like Henry was kind of like, okay, well, this is going to be a way of negotiating a little bit more peace between our children. Because if you're kind of like marrying in the king, then everyone's going to get on a little bit more. I mean, pretty much exactly the fucking opposite happened. Yeah. So that's when Henry kind of like starts showing up, right? So he becomes king really, really early, which is a thing that you have to understand about him. But the reason that he becomes king really, really early is because this was Henry II trying to be like, it's gonna be my son. 100%. This is how succession is going to work, and that's because the anarchy had basically just concluded with Henry getting on the throne, and he just wanted to make it clear how the line of succession was going to work. So he ends up getting crowned super, super early, in when he's about 15. So in the 1170, right? One of the things that Henry, his dad, immediately does is attempts to piss off Louis VII, because basically the daughter gets sent over there to go, when you get crowned, ordinarily your wife gets crowned too. And we think that maybe they kind of like intentionally delayed her on the way up to Westminster so that she wasn't there, just so Henry could be like, yeah, you like that bitch? Like, she's not the queen. Or like whatever, which is like great way of calming this down, Henry. Like very, very good job or whatever. But he does kind of like have a crown to his name, but his dad is still doing all the work, right? And that is not surprising because Henry is 15.
Yeah.
Right. And also it's not that surprising because Henry is also like a celebrity.
Yeah.
Right. And Henry doesn't really give a fuck about running the kingdom because Henry is a very famous tournament guy.
Yeah.
And hilariously, everybody loved him. Like, we have all of these sources where people are just like jacking it about how great he was. So like there's a troubadour, Bertrand de Bon, who wrote about him saying he was the best king who ever took up a shield, the most daring and best of all tourneyers. From the time when Roland was alive and even before, never was a knight so skilled, so warlike, whose fame resounded so round the world, even if Roland did come back, or if the world were searched as far as the river Nile and the setting sun. So my man could ride a horse.
Wow. Getting gassed up there.
Gassed.
You're talking him up.
Yeah. Bertrand de Born gassed up, Henry II. He's the new Riz King. What can I say? So basically, of course, we have to understand that probably part of this is kind of propaganda, but, hey ho, there's this. So, he is just for a lot of the time going around, going to tournaments, and that will take up your time. Right. Yeah. It's very expensive. It's like he and his boys are kind of moving around all the time. And that's kind of what he's doing. Now, there's certain people who kissed his ass and were like, oh, he's very smart and stuff too. But I'm like, we hear more about the tournaments because that's all he was ever doing. And if he's so smart, how come he didn't like look into running his kingdom ever? But then eventually, like when his mom and dad fall out and his mom's kind of in Aquitaine, and he's kind of like running out of money because like he's doing all this kind of expensive stuff all the time. And he's like, hey, wait a minute. Aren't I supposed to be the king? Where's my money? What's going on? Right. So it's the year of our Lord, 1173. And like everybody, all of the contemporary chronicles say that he gets mad because basically he doesn't have any realm to rule and he doesn't have any money. And so, but whether or not that's like true, I think that there's also kind of like he's spending a lot of time on the continent around the people who are pissed off at his dad. Right. So like he is around the Angevin people and stuff who feel like, you know, he is he's kind of like, I don't know, draining the coffers in order to do stuff like fight whales, you know, things like this. And they don't like the way that he's running things. So basically, he does like take part in this particular rebellion against his dad, right? And Eleanor is very, haha, yes, sickos, yes. You know, like possibly it's her idea. It could be that she's like, hey, fuck your dad or whatever. And, you know, because young Henry is very popular, completely within the realm of possibility that if things went well, this would all be fine, because Henry II is kind of like so popular. Like he's not but I mean, there is the whole Thomas Becket thing. So, you know, there are some question marks over Henry II, you know, and this kind of thing. But anyway, he rebels against his dad and it doesn't work.
Whoops.
Yeah. Oops. It doesn't work. But then, so we have this thing where, his mom gets, you know, kidnapped. And, you know, either they're like, okay, well, I guess we've got to close it in here or whatever. But it seems like it was kind of a bit of a deal where Eleanor is like, okay, we'll let the boys off the hook, right? And then basically Henry II is like, well, wouldn't you like some money? Like, I'll give you more money to go on tournaments and stuff. And he's like, oh, okay, well, all right, okay. So he gets like more. So he gets more money to go on parade all the time. Right. So basically spends the next 7 years going to tournaments. Right. Like, you know, and then he gets like little jobs, but the fun jobs from his dad. So like he gets to like go to coronations in France and things like that in place of his dad. He like will be the one who like carries crowns as the steward. You know, he gets all like the kind of public facing jobs. Then in 1182, he kind of like falls out with his bestie, who was like the leader of the tournament boys. Yeah. We don't know what happened here. Some people suggest that his bestie was fucking Queen Margaret, his wife. David Crouch kind of thinks that it's just like, I don't know, it's something else. It's about money. Yeah. Right. And so basically they all kind of like fall out. There's this whole thing where he's like, well, what do I do now? Right. Because I've kind of given my whole life to doing these things. He then rebels against his father again. So gets bored, rebels against his father. I don't know. So he kind of like had been on campaign against his dad. He dies in Limousin in 1184. And it is like not good. He gets dysentery, right? He had been kind of pillaging the local monasteries to raise money in order to keep this campaign going. And then he's like, I'm dying. Like, I'm about to shit myself to death. He's like laying naked on the floor in front of crucifixes, begging for forgiveness. He writes to his dad and is like, Dad, like, I'm going to die. Can you, like, please come and, you know, forgive me or whatever? And his dad is like, this motherfucker's trying to trick me. I'm not going.
You're not fooling me that easy, son, you bitch. I'm dying. And then like a day later, he's like, oh, fuck. God, fuck.
Yeah, exactly, right? And it's like, so he shits himself to death alone without reconciling with his father. And then his dad feels bad about it later. And apparently, like, there's this possibly apocryphal quote where after he finds out that he died, Henry goes, he cost me much, but I wish he'd lived to cost me more. Which is like,
my boy funny. Was just like me.
Exactly. And then like his mom makes his mom makes like this attempt to like maybe get him made into a saint. Which is kind of like a popular thing to do with like dead royals, but it's like literally what did he do other than be good at tournaments And I don't know, all of the
that's
pillaging,
saintly.
like pillaging all of those monasteries right before probably doesn't look too good. Anyway, like it's aborted, but we've got like a couple of like hilarious sermons that remain that are like, oh, isn't it good? You know,
look how good he rode a horse. Oh, God. Only a saint could ride a horse that good.
Interestingly, we know more about what he looks like than what his mom looked like. Like, because like people are like writing like a jack off poetry about the tournament guy. So he knows that he has that he was tall, broad shouldered, with a long, elegant neck. Medieval people are like, yes. He had freckles, blue eyes, and reddish gold hair. So there you go.
Rip to a ginger king.
Yeah, ginger
literally.
king, a literal ginger king. He is got a pretty cool tomb in Rouen Cathedral. So if you're ever there, go check it out. But yeah, it's quite funny. Quite funny, in my opinion, to be a tournament superstar, shit yourself to death, and like, you know, hey ho, that's that. There you go. That's Henry the Young King. I'm kind of obsessed with him. It's like, you know, what if like a quarterback or something was also the king. It's great. It's good.
No, it's like JFK. He's just like JFK. He's like, oh, he got there and he died too young. Oh, he died. It was so tragic. Oh, of course, England has a lot of guys like that. But yeah,
I mean, this could be a candidate for wrong kid died, but I mean, I don't feel like it is.
I feel like the wrong kid died, and the fact that that not all of them died before becoming king.
Yeah.
Because they seem to be pretty bad at it. Yeah. Okay. Moving on to the third son of Eleanor and Henry, who is Richard, who will eventually become Richard I, King of England, and be known to history as Richard the Lionheart. Eleanor, what about this guy, and why is he so overrated by history?
Well, I mean, I literally think that a lot of it has to do with him going on crusade later. And I also think that part of it has to do with just comparing him to John. Like, that's kind of part of it, where people are like, well, he certainly wasn't John. And, you know, it's a lot easier to kind of like talk shit about the guy who never bothered ruling you, right? And to be fair, like, most of his rule is actually done by Eleanor. So you're like, hey, things are going pretty well. Bring him back, you know. So yeah, I think that he doesn't suffer, but is kind of like big upped in comparison to John. So like, we think that he spent maybe like 5 seconds in England when he was a kid, but his mom kind of like took him to France with him when she like fucks off, right?
A real carpetbagger.
Yeah. So it's like he kind of goes down to the continent, kind of like, you know, 1165 or so, and then it's just like that. We don't know what his education was like. We do know that he composed poetry, and like in a couple of different of the French dialects. So, you know, he's his mama's boy there, right? Like, she loves that shit. And like, he looks a lot like his brother Henry. That's one of the things. And anyway, so he's kind of like very much growing up in the kind of like French vein of things, because he's within his mum's kind of milieu. And so, and also it was kind of like, yeah, absolutely have at it, because he's the spare. And everyone was just like, yeah, whatever. Like all of Henry's attention is going to young Henry, right? So like, yeah, fine, help yourself. So basically what kind of gets set up is that Richard is going to be the one who kind of takes over the Duchy of Aquitaine from his mum. So he's kind of like styled in order to do that. Kind of like, hence the, you know, writing sonnets and all this shit, right? Yeah. So that's kind of how it sort of starts out. He then also takes part in the revolt with his brother against his dad. So like, he's kind of like, yeah, I mean, his mom is like, do it, or like whatever, or maybe not, I don't know. But like, he don't really care about his dad. He's been down in France the whole time. And when his brother goes for it, he's like, oh, word. Okay, that sounds good. I'm going to sort of take part in that as well. And like off he goes to do a little light treason, right? So they kind of try to team up with their mom's ex, Louis VII, in order to kind of like gang up on their dad, but it doesn't kind of like really work. They go around kind of like getting some supporters in England, like a couple of the earls and things are like, oh yeah, okay, I'll go against it. But basically Henry manages to turn it at the last moment. Eleanor gets captured, and Richard.
Mama.
Is
no,
like,
Mama.
No. Oh, Mama, no. Ah, merde. Mama. Etc. So.
Just the fanciest little Fauntleroy ever.
Yeah,
Mama.
Mama.
Please.
Like
Who will give me sweet treats now? Mama.
Exactly. Mama. Je suis l'écho de lion. Où est mon maman? Etc. But again, he gets let off, possibly because of his mother's intervention, who knows. And basically he kind of spends a bit more time then kind of looking after the overseas holdings, so like Aquitaine, things like that. So he gets more offered to him in the conflict than a lot of his brothers. So he gets like 4 castles in Aquitaine, half of all of the money coming out of it. He gets like some castles in Poitou, stuff like that. So it's a lot of income, and it's actually stuff to do, right? So, in comparison to Henry, who isn't really doing very much, like it's not so bad, right? But then also when Henry III dies, the young Henry, then they're kind of like, oh, well, okay, well, I guess it's just as well that he's actually had stuff to look after, because it seems like if he's going to be king, he's going to need to know about that. So anyway, when his daughter's dying, he's kind of like, oh, okay, I guess that we need to kind of get ready for this. And he ends up kind of like, he'd been fighting in battles here, there, and everywhere too. Like he does like a kind of, there are sieges, these sorts of things. And he gets really, really into this. And so it's sort of like, this is where he gets the whole Coeur de Lion name. So yeah. Anyway, his dad dies. Eventually does he get to overthrow him? No. But he manages to die, and Richard is like, oh, okay, cool. I guess that I'm the king now, right? Like, he does some like kind of going around France in the meantime and being like, hey, I'm the king, get fucked up. But as soon as Maman is let out of jail, and he makes sure that happens, like he is like, cool, I'm gonna go on crusade. Right, so and one of the first things that he does is get invested as the Duke of Normandy, like not as King of England, right? So that's like which kind of tells you which way the wind is blowing. So he kind of like puts things together, and he's like, okay, well, I want to go on crusade because Jerusalem's fallen to Saladin at this point in time, and everyone loves this, right? So here's the thing. This is another reason why he is considered a really good guy, is that medieval people are like, crusade, yes! Woo!
Yeah.
Finally, we're going to do it. And so he wants to move over there. Now, for England, this means that Eleanor is really going to be in charge, like whatever. And, off he fucks, right? He does some spicy things, like go occupy Sicily on the way. Take Cyprus. And while he's in Cyprus, he stops to get married.
Yeah.
He marries a princess of Navarre, which is quite funny. Anyway, he goes over to the Holy Land, and would you believe does not retake Jerusalem. I'm just
shocked.
Yeah, exactly. So, but he kind of pals around. They managed to capture Acre or Acre. I never know how to fucking say it. Sorry, everybody. Maybe get scurvy. Just like hashtag just crusade things. And then, he kind of ends up going back to Europe after, Jerusalem emphatically does not end up falling. But like there are all these rumors that he and Saladin were like kicking it. But I don't know if it's that people have a really weird relationship with Saladin at this point, where they kind of like him because he's a winner, but then they're like, oh, but you're not supposed to like guys who take Jerusalem or whatever. But he does kind of like manage to negotiate a bit of a truce where like, people who need to leave Jerusalem are able to get out of Jerusalem, this kind of thing. Anyway, he starts going back to England to maybe see about that place he's supposed to be running. And he has to do that by going through Corfu. Now, Corfu is owned by the Eastern Roman Empire, and the Emperor Isaac II isn't a big fan of Richard, given that Richard annexed Cyprus. Right? It's like, I don't really like that.
Whoops. My bad.
So, Richard is, disguised as a Knight Templar.
They'll never catch me. He's wearing a fake mustache.
Yeah, and so he's kind of like on his way back. Anyway, lo and behold, he's kind of found eventually. By the time he's around Vienna, and everyone is all like, me and all my homies hate English people. And, we could ransom you out. Like, we can get money to send you back to Constantinople. We can get money here. We can get money there. They're shaking Eleanor down and John down in England. And, all this money has to basically been, spent to get him out of jail. He gets captured by the Holy Roman Emperor. And it's and they're like, you have to give me 100,000 pounds of silver. Or I'm not letting him out, which is quite funny. Then he celebrates with a light war against Philip of France, which is...
As you do.
Yeah, and he's just basically going around slowly kind of attacking castles on his way home, because after all this money had to be paid, he's like, well, how do I pay for this? Right? So he's sacking a castle, sacking a castle, sacking a castle. Eventually he kind of gets back into the French lands, and he is in Limousin, however, trying to suppress a revolt, and then just gets hit by some random kid. Some random kid basically shoots an arrow and hits him. He gets gangrene and dies. Right. And then hilariously, he apparently is go find that kid. Tells the kid, here's 100 shillings, good shot, and it goes, hey everybody, don't touch this kid. They immediately murder the kid.
No.
I know, even though he specifically said not to. Anyway, he dies of gangrene. F. He gets chopped up into pieces. His heart's buried in Rouen, in Normandy. Yeah. His guts are in Chalouse, where he died. And the rest of his body is hilariously buried by his dad's feet in Fontevraud Abbey, but also his mom's feet, so whatever.
Wow.
Yeah, so...
It's not weird at all.
None of him kind of at all buried in England, you will notice. Never really went to England very much. Didn't really speak English.
Famously didn't like it at all. Or at least rumored to have not liked it at all.
But English people love to jacket about him. I guess it's just because he's a knightly dude, right? Yeah. They like knights. So, yeah, there you go. Real fuck up. We're just always getting kidnapped. He's just always why? When you become king of a realm, it's generally not considered best to then immediately fuck off to the Holy Land. I would simply secure my realm, knock a chick up a couple times, and then you can go loose to Saladin.
Yep. Then you can go take your L. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's Richard. He. He's just kind of useless. He just costs the realm a lot of money and then dies. Dies to a kid. Man, fuck those guys for killing that kid. That sucks.
It really sucks because, specifically Richard was don't you fucking do it. Yeah.
Those bastards. Yeah. All right. And now we will briefly turn to Geoffrey, who will be Geoffrey II, Duke of Brittany. This is the only one of Eleanor and Henry's adult male kids to not become king of England in some form. So yeah, Geoffrey II, the forgotten one.
Yeah, he's
the kid who died.
He's quite funny because so he gets, what we know about him, it has a lot to do with marriages, where he basically gets married off to one of the Duke of Brittany's daughters, because Henry is always fighting with the Duke of Brittany. And so Henry captures the Duke of Brittany and is like, your daughter's your heir now, and she's married to my son Geoffrey. Okay.
As you do. Yeah. Normal courtship rituals.
Yeah, and this was weird even in terms of like medieval shit. But basically it takes a long time for them to get married, but they do kind of like get married. Then when Henry and Louis are having like yet another war or whatever, it all kicks off because basically they're like, how should we collect Crusader taxes from the Levant? And Henry and Louis are like, I'll fucking kill you. Oh yeah, I fucked your wife. I fucked your wife. I fucked your wife. I fucked, like whatever.
I fucked your wife. I fucked your wife.
Yeah, exactly. What you want? What you like about
that?
I
fucked her last. How about that, bitch?
Woo! So basically, Geoffrey decides he's going to revolt against his father, as his brothers do in 1174. When he's kind of, he's very much being raised in the French context. He sees himself as like, the Duke of Brittany or whatever. And he's like, yeah, fuck my dad or whatever. Yeah. Again, they all lose and he goes back to being Duke of Brittany or whatever. Hilariously, though, he was like besties with Louis the Seventh's son, Philip.
Yeah.
And so like they would just get together and be like, I think we should rebel against your dad. Yes, I think that's a good idea, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then so basically that means that like he's kind of like at court in France a lot. So it's not really surprising that we know much about him. But he knocks his wife up and has a couple of kids, has 3 kids, Eleanor, Maud, and Arthur. He's not particularly popular with English people because they're like, how dare you, attack your father? And he's like, fuck my father. I do not like him. Did a lot of attacking monasteries and churches to raise funds for campaigns. But like, hey ho, so did Henry III. What are we going to say? But like one of the things about him is he's got these 3 kids, one of whom dies really, really young. But then there's like Arthur, the Duke of Brittany, who is supposed to be his heir, who dies kind of about 1203. But then his daughter, Eleanor, the Fair Maid of Brittany, is still alive. And one thing that happens is kind of in theory, she should be the heir to the throne, right? Because so he dies before, Richard or whatever. So it was kind of like no one ever really thought about it. But then after Richard dies and doesn't have an heir, well, there is an heir. It's Geoffrey's daughter. So John fucking imprisons her.
Oh.
Yeah, like, which is, so they're like, there's this whole thing where, and even people that, so this goes down very poorly, where everyone is like, leave that poor girl, and then, of course, also she was really hot, so everyone is all like, oh, free the hottie.
If she'd been ugly, they'd be like, yeah, let her out, I guess.
Yeah, she eventually becomes a nun, and so, like, and that kind of, like, negates the whole thing. But so it's just kind of an interesting sort of side note because Geoffrey just kind of like dies. He dies at 27. We don't really know why he died. One, you're gonna like this one. I choose to believe this one. My hand canon is that he was trampled to death in a tournament. And allegedly his good friend, the Prince Philip, tried to jump into his coffin at the funeral.
Just friends.
Just boys being pals.
Yep.
Just pals being boys.
Yep. They're in it for a little just friends spooning.
Yep. Oh, so, God. I mean, and maybe that is true or maybe it isn't. But like, I'm just saying, That's in Roger of Hoveden Chronicle about it. But that's basically what we know about Geoffrey. Not a ton, because it was sort of like settled. And if all of his brothers hadn't fucking died, there would just be like no real reason to worry about it. But yeah. So there you go.
Yeah.
You know, he was very French.
Yeah.
He got trampled to death, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's Geoffrey. And then lastly, we come to old John, King of England, scourge of the land, and enemy of one Robin Hood. So, yeah. What do we got with John?
He's Papa's special little boy.
Yes.
Isn't he?
Yes.
So he's like, so Eleanor...
The only thing better than a mama's boy is a daddy's boy.
Yeah,
Holy
and
shit.
like 100% just a daddy's boy. And possibly part of the reason that everything kicked off between his brothers and dads, because his dad would kind of go around and be like, oh, you can have that castle. You deserve a special little treat, my son. Here is a castle. You may have this castle. You know, and so... The boys are like, why are you giving my castles to John? It's like, oh, look at him. Oh, look, he loves it so. He loves it so. Go on, you know, kind of thing. And so, you know, possibly that is part of the reason why it all kicks off. So, yeah, he's a real daddy's boy. Like, and he's often on campaign with his father, kind of like goes around with his dad, you know, kind of like goes to do genocidal shit in Ireland for his dad. You know, things like this. So he's always kind of on the right side of things, according to Henry II, right? So he gets a lot of experience kind of about conflict and like what happens like on the road. A lot of nobles automatically don't like him because his dad is constantly confiscating their lands to give them to John, like when he's a kid. Because they used to call him John Lackland. Which they thought was very funny. They were like, ho, ho, ho. Ho, ho.
That's pretty good.
Isn't that funny that he doesn't have any land? He doesn't have any land. He's got no land. But anyway, yeah, you know, eventually Henry fucking kicks it. Henry III. Obviously, his brother is that now reigning for 11 years, of which he is never home. And, you know, he needs all this, you know, money or whatever. And at the time, he marries Isabel of Gloucester, who has a lot of lands. So he ends up, like, running Cornwall and Derby and Dorset and Somerset, and just, like, huge amounts of land. Like, right. And basically, Richard does this to be like, you're not going to steal the kingdom, are you? You're not stealing, no one's stealing the kingdom while I'm gone, are you? And it's like, bitch, I don't need to steal the kingdom. You aren't here.
Yeah.
You're not here. But, you know, like people are still jacking it about the concept of Richard. So, you know, nothing really happens with that. So, like, you know, basically his mom and a succession of bishops are running shit while he's gone. Eventually, Richard kind of dies. And then, like, hilariously, so John eventually gets on the throne in 1199. So, you know, arrests his brother's children, you know, and things like this. But basically, Richard kind of had sort of said that John was supposed to be his heir presumptive. I mean, that's what people kind of say, but like, who knows? Who absolutely knows? John ends up kind of like then just trying to make things rub along. Does some weird shit like go get married to a French girl, even though he's got a wife, like sets his wife aside. So like there's this chick, Isabel of Angoulême, and she's hot. By all accounts, incredibly hot. And so like he then has to get rid of the other Isabella, his wife, the Countess of Gloucester. And so like he does this by saying that he didn't get the good papal dispensation to marry Isabella of Gloucester. So he shouldn't have been able to do this. Right? And it's like... So that's quite funny. And everyone is like, okay. But then everyone is like, well, he clearly has a hard-on for this new Isabel of Angoulême. So, like, what are you going to do? But Isabel was engaged to, like, a French guy and, like a very high-up dude from Poitou. And so this doesn't go down particularly well. And so this kind of, like... So getting this particular boner means that, like, he is... really starting shit in the French lands, right? And there's a lot of realm to rule, and you probably don't need to be pissing people off in Poitou, right? So yeah, eventually things kick off. They lose Normandy, which is so important, right? Like, his brother's fucking buried there. Like, Normandy is so important. Normandy is so important. Then, of course, you have stuff like him always trying to bring up money so that he can go fight for Normandy, so he can go fight in Ireland and stuff like this. The dukes take a dislike to this. And they kind of feel that he has a little too much power, and that things perhaps need to be codified to remind this motherfucker, like, how things work, right? And so you end up getting, like, these varying rebellions and things like this, which result in Magna Carta. Magna Carta, as I always say, not particularly important, actually, because it's just kind of about reasserting rights that the barons actually already held. But, there is a light rebellion about it, so that's probably bad. He spends all his time trying to get enough money to retake Normandy, because that's where a lot of their money comes from. So he's not very popular with that. He kind of has a lot of... there's a lot of drama in the royal household. We could say that. There's kind of like several cliques that are always kind of fighting for each other. And so they're always kind of like trying to figure out who is going to be like the number one up. So things are always like really, really up in the air there. And like, I mean, by all accounts, he just wanted to spend a lot of time banging his very hot wife. Which he had a number of. He has like 5 of them with Isabella. So that's pretty fine. But yeah, like basically not very good, famously, in keeping his dad's empire alive. Spends all his money trying to kind of take Scotland, Ireland, and Wales. Not very successful. Gets excommunicated by the Pope. Things like this. So just like, he's just a chaos demon. This is the thing about John. So it's like, he's exactly what you would think that a little daddy's boy would be on the throne, where it's just kind of like, no, but it's not fair. And Papa said that I may have Ireland. Wales, how dare you rebel? How dare you rebel?
Oh, no.
Pope Innocent III, who famously simply loves to excommunicate people, excommunicates him. And it's just like, okay, great. Now the kingdom's under interdict. Fucking brilliant. So yeah, like it's an interesting one though, because what I would say, like he dies in 1216 when he decides he doesn't like Magna Carta, right? He's like, I go to the Cotswolds to kind of like try to sort this out. Then, okay, we're going back through Lincoln. We're sorting it out. And then guess what he gets? Dysentery.
Yeah.
And he then shits himself to death. So yeah, it's very difficult. One thing that I can say about him is I think that he inherited a really difficult situation. There was supposed to be all these brothers who were kind of like taking care of the bits in France, taking care of and he wasn't even supposed to be in this equation at all. He was just supposed to enjoy his several castles and what have you. And then suddenly you get jumped up to, by the way, you're the king now. Also, everybody's mad. Right? And his dad was really competent at capturing things. And John wasn't. And he just wasn't. And he didn't have enough money. And Richard had already bankrupted the kingdom. So it was just always going to be a really difficult task, especially for a sad little daddy's boy. And we remember him mostly as the guy from Robin Hood, which is funny.
The guy who signed the Magna Carta under duress.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, the whole thing is, everything that you remember about John is just like really pathetic. And then his hot wife goes and like marries someone else in France and has a bunch more kids.
Just like, fuck this.
Yeah, I'm off.
I'm not spending another second here. I'm out.
Au revoir, bitch. Like, so I find that quite funny.
I do love how, like, the French ruled England, but they just fucking hated it. They hated it so fucking much.
They're like, I want to make it clear that I think I should be king, but I don't want to be around here very much. Kind of.
Yeah, you have to give me money, but I'm going back to the mainland to be surrounded by less sheep, I guess.
I want to make it clear that it's always fine to do the bad French accent.
Yeah.
You can always do the bad French accent, and you can always do the bad Italian accent.
It's true.
It's fine.
It's true.
There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. Yeah. So that is the mini Failsons of Eleanor of Aquitaine. She, did a lot of great things, but then her sons fucked up a lot. And
Raising Sons wasn't one of them.
Raising Sons. Yeah, it wasn't her strong suit. But if that's the only demerit against her, well, I guess that.
We can't hold women responsible for the actions of the men that are attached to them.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. Yep. So that is another episode in our Medieval Failsons. We will be back next time with an interview, and of course the Dante's Inferno book club episode will be out for patrons later in the week. Yeah, that's all we got for now. The normal stuff. Check us out on Patreon. Follow us on Twitter. Give us good reviews. All that sort of stuff. Eleanor, what's going on with you?
Yeah. So I have got some blogging stuff. It's gone up. Did a little something about the Holy Roman Empire. I kind of realized I'd never written like a kind of like pot history of it, so that if you are constantly wondering why it is that I'm going on about things, like it's just the fastest kind of like 2,000 word synopsis to explain its fucking deal. If you need it. So do check that out over at going-medieval.com. As always, you can check me dicking about on social media at Going Medieval. Buy my books. What can I say? I'm quite tired.
Do it. Yep. Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, Luke is Amazing, other social media sites as well. You can find my old show, People's History of the Old Republic. It's about Star Wars. You can find it wherever you're listening to this right now if you are so inclined. But yeah, that's going to do it for us today. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye!